Hello lovely people of YouTube, and welcome back to another video on the Woovebox. So this one is going to be all about the global page. So this is the track global page, not what I would call the global page, because there are two different global pages. If I go back to song view, we've got a global page for the overall song, which has like master settings like your BPM and the root and all of that. I'm going to go through that in a separate video. This one is about the global page on the sequencer pages, which is the third one across. So you've got your sequencer first, then you've got pattern, and then you've got global. So before we get stuck into that, usual kind of things, just get them out of the way first. The good old messages. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing, bell notification, all that good stuff. And if you want to help support the channel, then you can do so via Patreon. There are links in the description of the video somewhere down here. And you will get some free stuff for that as well. So thank you if you do support me on Patreon already, or if you're thinking of doing so in the future. Okay, so let's crack on with the global page. So the global page is reasonably straightforward, and I'll go through each of these in order. So remember, any of these lit up buttons mean there is some parameter on there that we can change. I've got a completely blank song at the moment. I'm going to put some notes in to explain a few things in a minute. So the first one is pretty straightforward. Master volume, and that is the master volume for this track. So are we just going to do like a basic C major kind of thing? So I'm just going to put a C chord on there, and we'll put an E minor on that track, and beat division we'll have as 4, which is the default setting. So we've just got straightforward kind of thing. So if we go over to the global page, so I've got master volume, so that's the whole volume of this track. So obviously we can bring it up and down depending on how we want it. I'll leave it around about 60 for now. So that's how you're going to balance all your tracks together with those individual volumes. Next one along is the transpose, which is fairly straightforward. These are in semitones, so if we wanted to take that up an octave, we would go to 0. Okay, up another octave would go up to 12. Okay, I'm going to leave it on 0. So again, fairly straightforward, very useful if you want to just take your whole track up or down various octaves. What sort of range have we got on here? Okay, 60. So we've got 5 octaves, plus or minus. So you've got basically a 10 octave range, which is pretty cool. So just kind of a little trick there. If you want to jump to like the minimum and maximum things without doing all of this, if you just press in, it will take you to minus 60 and then 0 and then 60, and that works on all of them. Let's just take that back to 0. So master volume, it's going to go up like to 127, then it's going to mute, and then it's going to go in the middle, which is 63. So quite useful little quick ways of doing things. I find that very useful on the envelopes if you want to do like a quick, a high release amount, etc. Next one along is the synth algorithm. There are loads of these. Now, I'm not going to cover all these in this video because I'm going to cover that when I look at the oscillators in future and sound design. Subtractive is generally the one I use most because that's the normal kind of, well, I say normal, but the most common type of synthesis. But you've got loads in here. You've got loads of different FM algorithms, you've got hard sync, you've got ring mod, and all that kind of thing. So and warp for samples and all that. So yeah, I'm going to cover that when I do some videos on sound design and what they all mean. Again, for now, just scroll through them. It's going to give you a slightly different sort of sound each time because of the synthesis algorithm. But subtractive is the one I use most. So next one along is, so this one is specific to the chord track, which is the bass transpose. So that chord at the moment sounds like that. If we transpose the bass note down, I'll transpose it one. So you can hear this is basically transposing, which I believe is the root note, or some sort of bass note for it. So hopefully, let's just go on to this so you can hear. In fact, let's get a slightly different, clearer sounding patch. That'll do. Okay, I've got some delay and stuff on there. Let's just get rid of the delay for now, just so you can hear it a little bit easier. Okay, let's turn that up a little bit. Okay, so you can hear with that, if I take that on off, okay, we're not getting anything, but if you want to kind of bring a bass note in with it, let's take it down an octave, let's take it down 2 octaves, 3 octaves, which sounds quite cool. So it gives you like an extra bass note, which is very nice, which I could play along with all day. I'm just going to get rid of that for now because we're going to put some bass in with it in a second. So the next bit is the quality. Have I covered everything? Oh, right. I'm going to come back to this one on the other tracks in a minute. I was going to go through all the others because this one's different on the chord track to the other tracks. So then we've got the quality, spectral quality parameter thing, which the default setting is usually on auto. This is all to do with like reserving like CPU power and so on. So if you leave it on auto, that's the one I generally have it on, it kind of automatically will like lower the resolution that's hardly audible just to make the whole thing play a little bit better, I guess. If you want it to be on full, then obviously you put it on full, but it's going to, obviously the more and more tracks you have in there, the CPU DSP usage thing, when it gets above 70%, I guess you're going to get some sort of glitching and loss of quality. I tend to leave it on auto. To be honest, I've had loads of tracks playing. I've never had a problem with it. You can kind of, if you take it down, you're not going to hear a lot even at 25. It doesn't sound much different. But you can on some tracks like force it to make it sound a little bit more lo-fi, I guess, by going down to 25 or 50. But generally I leave it on auto and leave it at that. But again, you can experiment with that if you wish to kind of go a little bit more lo-fi. Sound category, obviously we're on a chord track. Let's go on to, okay, let's just go on to a random track here. So there's nothing on this one. Well, there is, but I've not, what track are we on? A2. Okay, so let's say I want A2 to be another bass sound. So this is where you're going to choose what presets are loaded in the patch thing. So if I put the sound category as bass and then go over to the patches and start to load these, it's gonna, we need to transpose it down a little bit just to get it to the bass level. Let's go down a couple of octaves. Okay, and then go back to the patches, and then we can. Okay, it loads in all the bass patches for you. So that's very useful for your sound category. Obviously, if you want to change your track's behavior as to what presets you're going to get loaded in, you just choose that there. And you've got all the different categories. You've got bass, lead 2, arpeggiators, chord 2s, kick, snares, hi-hats, percussions, percussion 2, and then you've got a paraphonic one, which is going to kind of give you paraphonic chordy things. Again, all this sort of stuff I'll try and cover in future videos when I do those on sound design a little bit more. And then you've got 2 lots of effects. But again, you can load those in, have a play with the sounds, etc. Next one along is track behavior. So this one, as it says in the manual, it defines how a track should behave in terms of playback, user interface, functionality, stem rendering, file management, and more. So generally, obviously we chose bass on that one. I would have it on the same thing as your sound category. So with this, you've got bass, leads, arpeggiators, kick, snare, hi-hat, percussion, and then you've got different ones for samples. So this would be a sampled instrument. The next one would be a sample kit, so like a drum kit if you had loads of different samples. So that's more of a kind of like a melodic sampled instrument. That's for a sampled kit. You've got silent for if the track is silent, and then you've got one for multi-instrument, which you can change between different instruments on different steps. Again, I'm going to cover that in a later video. We've got a MIDI channel, which is fairly straightforward. So obviously you've got your 16 MIDI channels. This is if you're using this to send out what you're sequencing here to external gear. Again, I'm going to cover that in a later video. Swing, which is fairly straightforward. Let's go over to bass, and we'll put a little bass line in here. We'll do it with a bass line. Okay, let's just solo that out. Okay, so if we take it to no swing, okay, and then obviously we can got different swing amounts, give it more of a shuffly, swingy feel. And then it'll get to a stage where it's so swingy, it goes back on itself. So I kind of find around about the 20 mark sounds good for a standard, sort of swingy kind of feel. I'd said earlier about pressing on here to kind of skip between the various different parameters. You can also, if you hold down and keep that held down as you do it, you can go up in bigger increments than just single increments as well. So I'm going to take the swing down to 0. The next ones then are all basically like effect sends. So we've got Bit Crush. Let's get that bass going again. Nice for mangling up your sounds. So you can have, okay, so for the Bit Crush, you can have it pre or post filter. So this is post filter, positive values, and then pre filter are negative values. So depending on how you want to do your sound, either before or after the filter is always useful to have. We've then got saturation, which progressively saturates the louder part of the signal, making them sound subtly warmer. Again, very nice on basses. Okay, so that one's not having a massive effect on that bass, but you'll find different sounds, these have different effects on them. And again, that goes from 0 to 127. We've got distortion, which obviously starts to add positive amounts, which is kind of a traditional clipping distortion. Watch your ears. We could go really gnarly on the distortion. And the negative amounts are foldback distortion. For this, the signal is multiplied by 2 to the power of its value, something like that. But again, just do it using your ears. So again, you can get some nice, mangly sounds and things. Okay, let's leave that on around about there. We've got a reverb send, fairly self-explanatory. How much you are sending that sound to the master reverb. Those effects, so your reverb, chorus, and then you've got 2 delays. You set the settings for those in the song global page, so they're kind of like your master send effects. So chorus, again, straightforward enough. It's just the amount how much you can send to the chorus. And then we've got 2 delays. And you can send stuff to both of those delays as well. Let's just send it to, let's just take these down a little bit. So they're fairly straightforward, just kind of send effect things. So the last bit then that we've not talked about is parameter number 4, which is different to the chord track. So if you remember on the chord track, hold on, are we on the chords? This did the bass transpose thing. On all the other tracks, this determines how it follows the chord tracks, basically. And I'll try and explain a few of these. Let's just take this bass line down so it's a little bit less in your face. Okay, so what you'll hear is, have I still got it soloed? No. So the bass at the moment, hang on, I've got some random slide nonsense going off. Let's just put a different patch in. There we go, that's better. Okay, so at the moment it is following, it's going all the way to the beginning. So if it's on none, it's going to play whatever notes I programmed in there, which was going to put a D. Now we've got a C on there, and then an F. And then, so it's going to... Okay, so it's basically doing its own thing, and it's not going to follow the chord track. If we take it on to a LGL, it will change the notes so that they are always in the key or the scale of the song. Now because those notes I've played previously are in the scale of the song, it's not going to change anything, okay? It's going to be exactly the same as when it's on none. Okay, so if we look at the next one along, which is TRS dot 1. So what happens with here, and this one took me a while to get my head around it, this is what it says in the manual is sequence and live played notes are transposed by the root note of the chord and then adapted to always be in the key and scale of the song. So what I've got on the sequence page is I've got a C major chord on here and I've got an E minor chord on here. Okay, so if we go back to this note here, remember that originally was an F. If I just take it, let's just take this back to none. Okay, so I'm playing an F. Right, so if we go back to this, the TRS1, and when I go back here, it's going to start with a C major chord, and that's going to stay as an F because it's not transposing it, because it's the root note of the key that we're in. Okay, so it's not going to have any effect on that one. So it's still playing an F. Now, when it goes to the E, it's transposed it up to an A. So if I try and explain what's happening here, so the first note, it has no effect on it because we're playing a C major chord, so there's no transposition gone off. When it goes to the E minor chord, basically what's happened is that chord, the root note is E. So E is basically 2 steps higher, or 3 steps if you count the C. So you've got C, D, and E. So what it's going to do is when it gets to that F, it's going to transpose that up 3 notes as well. So it's going to go F, G, A. That is why it is playing an A. Okay, so it kind of, if we played a D chord there, it would take it up 2 notes because you've got C and D. So you would go from F and it would then be a G, and so on. So it took me a while to get my head around that. And then the same thing happens if we go on to the second note of the chord. Okay, so let's go back and see what happens there. Okay, we're still going to be playing this. Okay, so it's on this one. Okay, so it's changing both the notes these times. So it's starting on A because, if we stop that playing, stop. If you think of the C chord is C, E, and G for the C major chord. So what's happening is that E is transposing the first note of that of the F up to the A. And then when we play the second note, which is an E minor chord, which is E, G, hang on, what is it? It's E, G, and B is the E minor chord. So it's taking that F up then by the difference between the F and the G up to C. I know it's kind of it's sort of quite confusing, but if you play around with it, it kind of it eventually sort of starts to make sense. Honestly, it does. Okay, so now I've confused the hell out of everybody. You've got various other ones here. So you can transpose it by the third note of the chord. And then you've got this one, which is the closest. So if we go back here onto the... Oh, no, I'm on the wrong thing. Okay, so it's transposed that from the F. It's now always playing an E because... E is the closest, because what it basically does, the notes are adapted to play the note of the current chord that is closest in pitch. So the closest note in pitch from a C chord from F is E. Okay, so we're playing those two together, and the same thing then obviously when we're playing E minor chord, E is next to F. That's why that's not changing. And then the other one is CLS.A. Again, that's always plays in the current chord that is closest in pitch. So again, some of these will probably end up staying the same. So I think that's still taking it as E. Yeah, so like I say, some of them, the closest note is going to be the same note that you're always sort of previously playing. And then we've got the root. So it will basically transpose it. It'll be a C, and then it'll be an E. Okay, so it's changing the root of the bass note. Remember, I'm playing an F here, but it's changing it to a C and an E. Generally, I say generally, I do experiment with these a little bit. Root is a very good starting place because your bass line is basically just going to follow the root note of the chord sequence, which I find is a really good starting place. We've then got TR 1.5. So this is kind of like the original ones, the TRS 0.1. But what happens in here, they're transposed by the root note of the chord and then adopted to always be in the key and the scale of the song as per the other ones, and also inclusive of a root plus 7 semitones up, which is a fifth as a valid note. So it just kind of gives it another note that it can transpose itself to depending on what you're playing, your notes and chords, etc. So you've got the same thing, it'll do the second note of the chord plus a fifth and the third note of a chord plus a fifth, and then the always one plus a fifth, and then a root plus a fifth. I generally find with these, I think as I said when I went through, because you've got these on the pattern page as well that will override the global page. I kind of went through it because I wanted to try and understand it. I kind of understand it 80-90% of what I understand. Certainly the first ones kind of make sense to me, these ones. It's one of those things where unless you want to get really into music theory and thinking, right, so I'm playing a C chord and then I'm playing an E chord, so E is 3 semitones higher than the C, so it's going to transpose my note up by 3 semitones or 4 semitones or 5 or whatever, then go for it, understand it that way. The other way is just scroll through these and use your ears and think, okay, I don't know what that's doing, but it sounds nice. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day. It's what it sounds like. So I'm working on a song on here at the moment, and I kind of went through a few of those and I thought, oh yeah, that sounds really nice, just changing the bass line very slightly. So you've got all those options, and basically the global page then is, apart from the chord, is the same for all your 16 tracks. So the chord one is slightly different in that you've got that bass transpose thing. Okay, so the final thing then is the context menu for global. I've just had to put a few notes in there. So if you hold down global, you've got this raise mul 1 or mul 8. So you've only got those two options. Basically what that does is, if you're, let's say you've got your bass like at full volume and you're kind of not hearing it quite well in the mix, rather than having to go through all the other tracks and turn them down one at a time, what this basically does is keeps the volume of this one the same, and then it turns the other ones down. So you've got two options. You can turn it down by 1 or by 8. So what have we, I've still got the keys on here. Okay, so let's say that sequence is too loud over here. My global volume at the moment on the sequence, on the chords page is 117. So if I go back to, oh no, sorry, didn't mean to do that. Should have done that. Okay, so if I turn down that just to make it obvious by 8, okay, so you hold it until it says okay. If we now go back to the chord track, that has now gone down to 109. So if I do it again, okay, and it should now be 101, and it is. Okay, so it knocks it down by 8, or you can do it keep doing that. Need to go onto the bass track. So if we did it by 1, okay, it's now taking it down by 1. So you can do it in the very small increments, or like increments of 8. So I find that very useful if you just want to turn absolutely everything down. So it will turn all of those tracks down. Any tracks you've got with stuff on it will turn them all down by either 1 or 8. So you can then hear your volume on this one a little bit more. So if you've got 16 tracks, it's so much quicker than having to go through each individual track and turning them down one at a time. You may want to do that when you're balancing stuff up, but as a starting point, it's very useful for that. So that is basically it for the global page. I hope I didn't confuse you too much on the parameter 4. On these, like I say with those before, just use your ears. If it sounds good, don't try and understand it. Just, yeah, it sounds, if it sounds what you want it to sound like. And I like to experiment with those and get different sounds out of them and so on. So there we go. That's the global page. I hope that was of some use to you. And thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. And I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.